Hello, and welcome to the Sacral Circle, where we are healing sexual trauma collectively and lovingly. I'm your host, Janie Terrazas, and I'll be interviewing women from all walks of life who have had to face a sexual tragedy or abuse in one form or another and triumphed over their adversity. On every episode, a guest will deliver inspirational support, words of comfort, and empowering healing advice. They'll courageously share how their experiences impacted their lives and what led them to face and conquer the blockages that kept them from fully reconnecting to their inner power and divine feminine sacredness. Be sure to visit my website, JanieTerrazas.com, for more information on my coaching and healing services, and subscribe to the Sacred Stories podcast on iTunes. I want to thank our listeners for joining us today on the Sacral Circle, the self-love haven where we leave judgment at the door. And today I have a very special guest with me. She holds a special place in my heart. We've worked together on her show. She's very talented in so many different ways. This is Dr. Martha Tara Lee. She is the owner of Eros Coaching and a clinical sexologist. She's a certified sexologist with the ACS, as well as a certified sexuality educator with the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. She holds a doctorate in human sexuality, as well as certificates in sex therapy, practical counseling, and life coaching. She is the author of 2 phenomenal books, one of which is called Love, Sex, and Everything in Between. They recognized her in her own country of Singapore. She was recognized as one of the top 50 inspiring women under 40. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Martha. I want to put that doctor in there because I know how hard you work to have that. Yes, thank you. And let's go ahead and tell people how they can find you and get to your book before we get into your beautiful story and the work that you do. I know you have a website. It's Eros Coaching, EROS coaching.com. And yes, you can let them know how they can find you on Twitter and Facebook, too.
Yeah, so the best way really is to connect with me on my website, and all the links are on the homepage. And, of course, to subscribe to my e-newsletter.
Yeah, I love her newsletter. She has so much valuable information to share. And, I know it can be pretty difficult sometimes being a sexologist, and there's a lot of sort of stigmas that come along with that. And I feel like today you're really going to give our listeners a better sense of what a sexologist actually is and what it is that you do. But why don't we first get started with where you're from and how you came into this line of work, and because I know that you've also dealt with some abuse, and so you help women heal trauma. So tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so where do I start? I remember when I was, say, primary 4, I think. So those would have been 10. I think I was molested in school, when I was still schooling, at a bookshop. And this man basically was rubbing his penis against my butt. And this was very much in the public area. I was in the bookstore, and I love going to the bookstore and browsing through the books that I couldn't afford. And he came up to me and rubbed against me, and I didn't think, I thought at first maybe it was an accident, but really it wasn't. And he kept doing that on and off for maybe the next half hour. I just didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to draw attention. I froze. I didn't know what to do. And I proceeded to bump into the same guy again 1 year later when I went back to the bookstore, this time with my friends. I didn't go to that store for a year. And then a couple of years later, I bumped into him again. And this time, I was at Orchard Road at a mall. And he rubbed against me again and smiled at me as if he was like a friend. And I was really creeped out. And none of those 3 times in which I had contact with him that I actually screamed or made a scene. And I think that's part of the whole inability to find our voice. I don't know why it's so weird when I tell people my story of how I was molested when I was young. What are the odds of bumping into the same guy 3 times, twice in the same place? And I don't know, it's pretty weird.
You crossing paths with this particular individual for whatever reason was part of this journey that you're on.
Yeah, it's weird. I think one of the things that happens, I really believe as a spiritual person, is the law of attraction. You attract the things that you need to work through. And I think I was fascinated, even as a kid, with the shadow side of sex. Yeah, I was exposed to porn by my mom. I know this is going to sound even worse.
This is actually really great because in just a moment, I'm going to relate to you in so many different ways. And I think this is one of the reasons why I have such a sort of heart connection to you, because I think our sex trauma, it showed up very similarly and it impacted us, and the way we reacted was exactly the same. But I want you to talk about, yes, I appreciate that you are bringing up some of the tougher things to kind of talk about when it comes to this stuff, like let's say being exposed to porn, because I also was. So go ahead and please continue your story, and then I'll kind of share with you some things.
Yeah, so it's funny. I remember the first time I was with my sister, and then my mom was in her bedroom watching a VCR at that time, and so she said, hey, come and watch this. You're going to feel really good. And in that porn clip, it was a man wandering into the wandering into the woods, and proceeded to have sex with the 2 daughters and the mother. And we were 2 daughters and a mother. And I thought that was super, weird why my mom got us to watch that. Sure, I felt like sensations in my body. I felt aroused, and but I was really traumatized by how bizarre it was watching it with my mom, and how the scenario was exactly 2 daughters and the mom. And I don't remember how old I was, but I think I was 6 or 7. It was super inappropriate to think about it. And in the porn clip, what happened was the man's penis grew into the size of a bamboo when he received oral sex. So for the longest time, I thought that was how sex was like, that the man's penis would grow. And when people compare sizes, I'll be like, yeah, it really grows. Yeah, it really does hurt. I didn't correct this misconception until I had my first boyfriend when I was 19.
That is so fascinating to me, and I love that you're bringing this up, because when we're children and we're exposed to certain things like this, you have no other point of reference. And so this sort of becomes your main point of reference for a lot of different things, right? And also, I like that you brought up that you did, as a child, there's certain things that we can experience that does arouse us. The body just naturally has these sensations, and then we don't quite understand them. And sometimes, for me, when I think back to some of the stuff, there was a lot of shame that I had around the fact that it felt good, or that you know what I mean, or that I liked it sometimes, or that I would watch something, that I was being exposed to porn, or magazine pornography, or through this individual that this was happening with. They were kind of bringing this into my space. And you mentioned the shadow side of sex, that there was an appealing aspect to that. And I'd like for you to elaborate. I know what you mean by that, and it really resonated with me, because there is a sacredness to sex, and then there's also sort of that primal, right, human side of sex, and then there's the higher side of it, right, spiritually speaking. Is this what you're talking about when you talk about the shadow, where we're only identifying just the physicality?
So there's so many things to how my childhood experiences then shaped my my fascination with sex. First of all, there was the porn thing. Then there was learning how to masturbate when I was 5, asking my mom about it and her normalizing it. So this fascination with sex was there because of how little information I got. And then there's that confusing message of we're not talking about it, but yet I get an idea like it seems to be good because like I also receive permission, like, okay, you know, it's part of life to masturbate. So I think the shadow side of sex happens when, because we don't talk about it and we don't talk about it in open, positive ways, even though I guess my mom was trying to be positive in her own way. But because as kids, we are interpreting the world or we're trying to understand it or decipher this little, like these codes. And sometimes what comes up in our head is very different from the intention behind it. And for whatever it is, then the fascination and then the dark side of sex, which is how it can become warped by society, like how I was molested, and that caused this underlying like desire of trying to learn and understand more about sex and sexuality and what would compel people to do things to hurt other people, like molest them. And I guess in a way, it kind of led to me becoming a sexologist, wanting to help people.
And about what age did you start to realize that you were interested in studying it? And then also, in your studies, is that how you began to heal your own self, or did you seek out therapy first and then got into it through education?
Well, I think sex and relationships are very much linked. I just had this underlying assumption that sex was something powerful, wonderful, amazing, just the messages I picked up from my mom. And so I just naturally assumed that the sex I had would be with love, even though I was molested. And so I actually had really powerful, wonderful sexual experiences with my first husband. And so in my desire of, and even though I had negative experiences, I really didn't have like hate for sex. It was always like a fascination with it. And so when and where I could, I wanted to learn more about sexuality. And so when the internet started, that's really when more access to information. And I thought I was quite sex positive, always wanting to read articles and learn more. And when I went to sex school, that's when I realized that there was so much more to sexuality that I didn't know. Like, for instance, GLBTQ issues for the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, the people who identify as queer, didn't know much about kink or BDSM, bondage, domination, sadomasochism. I also didn't really understand, appreciate sex and disability or sex and aging issues. And so the whole world of sexuality just opened up to me. And and of course understanding how sexuality works, solo sex or when you are with partner or partners, different forms of relationships that people have. And so this fascination was there. The opportunities to learn wasn't. And when I got the money to pursue this doctorate and have this career change, then I decided to go for it. Yeah, previously I was doing PR marketing, then I did voluntary work and nonprofit work. And so becoming a sexologist was really a combination of many things that I was interested in. And I would say yes, for many years, because it happened when I was so young, less than 10, when I was molested, I think. And so the fear of men and the fear of the power of sex was always there. And so I guess there was this fascination with it. And maybe that's what led to my occupation. I generally like to think it's because I have been fascinated with it, some of the childhood messages I got. And I think in terms of like what I mentioned just now, the law of attraction, like we're attracting precisely the lessons we need to learn. Like on hindsight, I couldn't deal with it as a kid, but as an adult now, I can deal with it. Understanding that being exposed to the shadow and the powerful side of sexuality actually helped me to appreciate the different shades of what sex is about. I was also raped. I mentioned to you just now offline. I was raped many years later after I lost my virginity. I was with a guy who has a really big penis, and he didn't give me much foreplay. I started to have painful sex. I told him to stop. He didn't stop. I started to cry and scream. He didn't stop. And then he came, and then he said, it's okay, I came. As if raping me was not the issue, that I should just be happy that he came.
Oh my goodness.
That was so violating. That was like the most violating experience in sex. You know, being raped, telling someone to stop. Like, he was so nice and everything. Like, that was the second time we had sex. But no, you know, he didn't stop to get his pleasure, even though someone was crying and screaming.
Yes. Sometimes I'm compelled, when I hear things like that, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But on the other flip side, it's like I truly believe, like what you were saying before, that there are certain experiences that happen and that our trauma, when we can use our pain as wisdom and as a way to like teach others or help others, you know, not feel alone. If there's something really powerful, you know, in that. And
I really see your point. Like, I feel like shit happens to good people, or you know, like you know, if you want to talk about like being spiritual again, it's like there's this belief that the universe doesn't give you what you cannot deal with. Yet also the law of attraction, which is like we are attracted to things we are fascinated with. And so even though it's a terrible thing to wish on anybody or even onto yourself, that experience of being raped, I would say, probably isn't like the worst experience other women might have gone through who have to share their story or who are willing to share their story. But having had that point of reference definitely has helped me to be more compassionate towards women, to better understand what rape means and what it feels like, because I went through a similar episode. And so by association, I can empathize better. And so my personal experiences has helped me in my professional work to be more empathetic, to be less judgmental, to be able to use my imagination to fill in the gaps between the difference between what I've experienced and what my clients have experienced. And of course, we don't have to wish on ourselves all the bad experiences to happen in order to have more empathy. But I think like this point of reference has been useful for me in my work. So what I'm trying to say is we basically can choose to be really negative and be a victim and say, why me? And surely that's one of the stages of healing. Yet beyond that, it's what is the good that can come from this? And using that experience to form part of my repertoire of who I am and really owning the side that I wouldn't really want to look at, but having looked at it, actually become stronger for it.
Yes, Mamacita. Preach. I love it. You, just said it so eloquently. And this is how I feel, and this is why I'm doing this show, because, you know, I too had experienced rape. It was a date rape experience in college. And you had mentioned, like, you had gone out with this person before and had already had sex with them once before, willingly, consensually. And I really want to, like, drive this home to women, is that, or even men, you know, I know that it doesn't happen as often, but I know that men also are sexually traumatized and or raped. And so for all of us to be able to recognize that we can move beyond it, and that just because you say yes one time, you can say no at any given time. that doesn't, do you know what I mean? I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit on that, because some people, the mentality and the psyche that people have sometimes, if you've had sex with somebody before and it's like, well, they almost feel as if they have a right to your body again, and that's not true.
It's not true. In consent, because I'm Asian, right? I'm Singaporean Chinese, born and bred in Singapore. I had very little sex education growing up. In fact, none. The only thing that I had was really people from sanitary companies coming through and teaching women, the girls, about menstrual cycle, and then the boys get to play outside. So very little sex education. And so the whole idea of consent and boundaries was all very new to me, even though I kind of understand it, but I really wasn't able to be fully eloquent in it. So one of the messages about consent when it comes to sex is that consent can be withdrawn at any moment, and that a person who is drunk is not capable of giving consent. And that just because they say yes to something doesn't mean that they say yes to everything. So, for instance, there's this movement happening called stealthing. This is when guys would be having penetrative sex, and in the middle of sex, remove the condom, and essentially they're calling it sexual assault, but I'm calling it rape.
I haven't even heard of this before. The psyche is disturbed in so many ways when it comes to sexuality. And there's still so much victimization, and particularly women that deal with a lot of this, like in different parts of the world for different reasons. And this is just like one other thing that, I mean, when I hear about it, just gets under my skin. Where is this happening at?
Well, this has been documented in a recent academic study that there's a rising popularity of stealthing, in so much so that people are like joining like communities to talk about how they can pull a fast one on their partner. And it doesn't necessarily mean like penis in vagina. It can be between two men as well, gay men too. And so this is really an act of sexual violence that is happening. So this is really completely unacceptable. I think it's really important to mention that. Engaging in talking about it actually educates more people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any time that we can bring a higher awareness on sex, the better, because what we don't know, we don't know, and I feel like knowledge is power, and it's important for us to educate ourselves on sex and our sexuality and our sensuality, and because it is such a big part of our existence. It's not the most important thing in life, but it is a part of life. And if you're going to be in relationships, it's also a good idea for you to really understand your body and learn how to have an open line of communication with your partner. Especially, Martha, like, do you know if there are any outlets or books, or I don't know if it's something that you talk about at all, but I feel like something that's not really being addressed is those that are in relationships with people who have sex trauma that are now starting to go through their healing process. And it's like how the partner handles that is also, I think, really crucial to the healing process of the individual processing the trauma. What's the outlet for them? I mean, because, I work as a relationship coach, and sometimes, this comes up, and being that I've dealt with it personally, I think I have like you were mentioning before, there's an empathy that you have, or a compassion, or a deeper understanding sometimes, and how when we have to literally walk through it and go through it, it makes it a little bit easier for us to kind of guide others.
Yeah, definitely. So I have worked with clients who have gone through sexual trauma and want support in it. And I have also had clients who I suspect have gone through sexual trauma or some kind of violence in their life, and don't want to tell me. And the way they behave in session, in relationship with their partner, is just like quite unpredictable. And so it was very difficult having a positive outcome in our sessions. So one of the things that happens, I notice, and I could be wrong because I'm just basing it on my experience working with clients, is that people who have gone through sexual trauma, they try to make it seem like it's okay because we're trying to just survive, really, like animals. We're trying to go into survival mode. And so we might have had bad experiences happen. And sometimes those things that are not really processed or addressed comes back and haunts us. So when we feel safe, actually our memories, our psychological fight or flight might calm down, and some of these things that needs to be processed actually comes up when they are in a long-term relationship or when they feel safe enough. And so they get triggered. They all of a sudden might find themselves not wanting their partners to touch them. They might find themselves feeling really like powerless, and the way that they feel like they can have control or feel safe in their relationship is not to have touch. And so when these things happen, it's really important to admit that there's a deeper underlying issue that needs to be addressed. And I find that some of the times when this comes to light, the partner might say things like, oh, okay, I don't want to re-traumatize you, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you. And so they might withdraw. They might have like a hands-off kind of thing. And when actually their involvement in therapy sessions are very important.
I totally agree. Go ahead and feel free to talk a little bit about or tell them the title of your show that is on iHeartRadio, right?
Yeah, it's called Eros Evolution. It is distributed on iHeartRadio. It's on the platform Om Times Radio and distributed in many places.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. I really loved being a part of your show, but I was married at the time when she had invited me on. I was actually working, my husband, and he was my business partner. We had a love coaching business together. And ironically, here the love coaches, right? Like the love coach was getting her heart broken. And towards the end, when all the conflict was coming up, I could kind of see through the behind the scenes and the transparency of his personal childhood trauma that was coming forward, and then my sex trauma and how it was like showing up as well. And he couldn't really hold that space for me. He wasn't in a place of being open to understanding and didn't have a deeper sense of caring to understand what was going on and how it was sort of impacting me. He just wanted it to all sort of be done. And when you're in a partnership, it does benefit you greatly when you have someone who really is open and willing to kind of do what they can to help you through it, even though it's not all of their responsibility. You know what I mean? We can't put all of that onto them. There is right, like we have to go through our own healing in solitude to some degree, but then if you are going through it in a partnership, they really do have to be open to learning and understanding what they can do to help you through it. And if you guys can get through it together, it really does strengthen the partnership. Wouldn't you agree, Martha? Like, have you seen anybody, like, are there any positive results from people that have been able to get through it together?
Yeah, I have, and it's really wonderful when this can happen. It does take time to unpack it, and the willingness, commitment, patience needs to be there. One of the things that does happen a lot in sessions is that when things get better, a lot of people just stop sessions. You know, they and sometimes you start counseling or you start coaching, start therapy, and things do get better initially, but that's kind of like a false start, because you get extra motivated, and usually they are already in trouble in the relationship. That's why they're seeking help. So obviously the session will have that positive effect initially, and yet after a while they fall back. And so sometimes when we want to talk about clients getting better, I'm quite hesitant to say like just a couple of sessions would do. Right. There needs to be a longer commitment, I feel. And so with some clients, just a couple of sessions, yes, there will still be help for sure. However, it would have been so much more beneficial if the sessions had just been longer.
Yeah, I believe that this is one of those things that isn't like a quick fix. It's a very slow, arduous process. And I would imagine that the percentage of couples that actually make it through it together is is probably minimal, but that if they both have the same intention and they have that solid love, where they're like, we're not gonna give up. I think that when a relationship comes to an end, it doesn't necessarily have to mean like the end of all ends. A lot of times people who have had trauma, once they lose a partner, they worry that someone isn't going to accept them or love them, that they feel like, you know what I mean, they're not worthy or they're tainted. And I just want people to know that there are a lot of people that are very open and very loving and very compassionate.
Yes. So I, was twice married, and both partners had very similar narcissistic, psychologically abusive kinds of personalities. And one of the things that I did at the end of my second marriage, this was 5 years ago, was that I decided to not date for a while and really go deeper into understanding the real root cause of why I can't find love and why I keep choosing the wrong kinds of men. And end of the day was really about the exact same things that we all grapple with, which is self-love and self-confidence. And so one of the things that really helped me a lot was having that time of silence and reflection and healing that needed to take place. And that actually took me about 2 years before I even started dating anybody after the second marriage. And one of the practices that really supported me in my transformation is orgasmic yoga, which is also the title of my second book. So it's a term that was coined by Joseph Kramer, my teacher, and in it, meditation and masturbation meets. This is when you masturbate mindfully. You are very much in your body, not in your imagination, not watching porn. You are noticing and feeling sensations in your body. And you do this for 30 minutes. And it's recommended that you do this for 30 days as a practice. And when you start doing something like that, you really literally don't just say you love yourself by splurging on clothes or like on food, but really like you splurge on giving yourself pleasure in your body. So that giving to yourself is also linked to your ability to receive. And so when you receive pleasure and you receive love in the form of nice sensations in your body, this is when your relationship with yourself starts to shift. I found that it was a really, really profound practice, and I recommend this to all people, men, women, regardless of your gender, sexual orientation. And this is a practice that will help us be more mindful, be more orgasmic, open up all these neural pathways in our body for more pleasure to enter our lives. And through this act of mindfulness, start to have a new relationship with our sexuality, with sensuality, and with spirituality. When you do anything long enough, you enter a trance state, and this is what the potential for masturbation to go into meditation and spirituality. So that practice really healed me in terms of being rough with myself sexually and masturbating in the same ways, and now learning to masturbate in different ways, to be gentle with myself in the bedroom. And outside of the bedroom, I notice myself being more compassionate, patient, kind, being more loving, taking life slower. So that is the feminine aspect of sexuality. The side of us that is not focusing on getting from point A to point B, which is quite masculine, but the more feminine approach of, I have all this time, I've given myself all this time, I have nothing to do but to just listen and to just notice and to not be so task or orgasm oriented and be pleasure oriented. So that practice really helped me a lot, and I can say for sure that I wouldn't attract the partner that I have now if not for orgasmic yoga. So So I've done orgasmic yoga maybe like 4 or 5 rounds.
That's beautiful. And again, you have a book on that people can check out. I'm sure that when you go to your website, which is Eros, EROS coaching.com, you can find both of her books there as well as all of her social media pages so that you can connect with her. I really like how you brought up that feminine energy, and I love that you bring up the word mindfulness, because as a mindfulness coach, I really believe that this is really where all of our healing lies, is us becoming very self-aware. It's like self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-love, self-illumination. I feel like these are all sort of embodying this self-love movement. And in order for us to nurture ourselves, we really have to reconnect with our bodies, our mental body, emotional body, physical body, spiritual body. Our sexuality is a tool for us that we can use when it's used properly, and when we heal our trauma. It can be used to help us heal our trauma. And I think that your discipline and your commitment to it is also really beautiful, because some people just they say they want to experience something different, but then they don't really stay dedicated to doing something to help themselves. And and we should be open to trying different things. So I really like that you brought this up. Yoga in general is so very healing, but orgasmic yoga just is taking it to like a whole nother level. And you were talking about the feminine and the masculine being so different, and how the feminine needs to be able to receive. And a lot of us have a very difficult time. Some of us are really good at giving, but we have a very hard time receiving without guilt, without feeling like a burden. We have so many inhibitions, so it's very difficult for us to fully surrender. And you really do have, meditation is such a beautiful thing too, to help you learn how to still your mind and connect with all of your senses, and being present and being in the moment, because basically when women are having sex, it's mostly like this. Oftentimes they feel like it's an obligation, or they just, like you said, they want to get from point A to point B, and they don't realize, wow, if you're in a healthy relationship, and you work towards having a healthy relationship with yourself, having sex can be very powerful in so many different ways. And even like you said, Martha, you can see, because you have such a healthy relationship with your body, and it's impacted your life outside of the bedroom. You have a lot more patience, because all these beautiful chemicals get released, oxytocin and serotonin, right? And all these things that bring our body into a state of rest. And sex for you now is like a sacred space, and a lot of beautifulness can come from that space when we're in it.
Yes, definitely, I agree. Good summary.
I want to thank you so much for your time and your energy, and all being so vulnerable and open. I want to remind people again to go to your page, which is eroscoaching.com. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Martha, before we go?
No. This is really awesome, and I agree with everything that we've covered. And another thing besides orgasmic yoga is Tantra, because those practices really help us to practice being able to speak up in safe containers. And so that would be another recommendation, like to go for workshops and start finding your voice in the bedroom.
Yes, finding your voice in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom.
Yes,
and thank you for all the work that you've been doing. How long have you been doing this for now?
7 years.
7 years. Oh, what a great number. It's so divine. You are illuminating a lot of people's minds and healing bodies, and helping couples learn what love actually is, and how they can take their connection to different levels. And it really is a spiritual thing. So you're beautiful, your work is beautiful, and I know that you've impacted a lot of people's lives. So for those of you that want more information, don't forget to visit our website. Oh, and by the way, you are now officially part of the Sacral Circle Sisterhood. so thank you for that. And I want to thank our beautiful listeners for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the Sacred Stories podcast on iTunes, where you'll find other impactful, inspiring shows. Connect with me via our social media pages. You'll find us at the Sacral Circle. Your shares and likes are greatly appreciated because they help spread the love. If you have any questions about my coaching and healing services, visit my website at JanieTerrazas.com. As we say goodbye, always remember to know your worth and continue to love and value yourself wholeheartedly. Peace be with you.